Welcome to the Right to Ignite podcast, where we talk to authors who are writing to ignite the next generation with a heart for the Lord. I am your host, Kyle Morgan, flying solo today without my co pilot and my co host, Brenda Covert. Today we have a special guest from the nonfiction side of things. Carolyn Bennett Fraiser is the author of Moontree, M is for Mason Jar, and educational books for the school and library market. She writes from her home in Brevard, North Carolina, where she maintains a small homestead along with her husband and a rescued blue tick hound named Lucy. When she is not writing, she enjoys playing the piano and hiking to the many waterfalls in her region. Carolyn, welcome.
Thank you. It's so great to be here.
I want to start off by focusing on the idea of nonfiction picture books. Sometimes when we think of picture books, we think of, Dr. Seuss and P.D. Eastman, but there's a whole different side of picture books that deal with nonfiction. What made you pursue this side of picture books?
Well, it wasn't something I initially intended. I began, like everyone else, writing fiction picture books. But I have a background in journalism. And one of the things I fell in love with when I worked for Christian newspapers and wrote for various websites and different Christian media and nonprofits is people's stories. I fell in love with just hearing people's real life God stories. And I loved being able to share those little known heroes that we don't normally hear about. And I think when I first started dabbling in nonfiction in the picture book world, I found that same excitement. And I loved finding these little known stories buried in history and just being able to share them with kids.
Yeah, I love that. There's some major publishing houses that deal with nonfiction, but then there's also the educational market, and I don't think a lot of writers are aware of that. Like, can you talk about that? Like, where do you even find these publishing houses?
Sure. There's a list that Evelyn Christensen keeps and updates on her website of educational publishers. And I'm trying to remember how I even first heard about them. I think it was just through discussions in the children's lit world that this was a possible opportunity. And I took a couple classes at some or workshops at some SCBWI conferences about how to get your foot in the door. And I just started sending out packets to these educational publishers. And my first round, I didn't get much response at all. So I dug in and I took a few more classes on how to really craft my writing samples and hone them specifically to certain age groups. And I had somebody look over my packet and I tweaked it and I started sending them out again and then got some bites. And so I have several books published for the ed market as well as for the trade market. So that's been exciting as well.
Yeah, that's so cool. And what's unique about that is that the marketing is completely different from what I understand. Like, you're not doing the author events as much. Like, that is more goes directly to, libraries and schools and stuff like that. Is that right?
Right. It's pretty much mostly for schools. It's, books that are written in a very expository language. They're very straightforward. They're for kids to do research, but they're also, I write leveled readers. So, specifically for kids that are needing high-low books, they're high interest
Yeah.
for a low reading level. So, on the one hand, you're providing good research material for kids. But on the other hand, you're providing a topic of interest for someone who might be a struggling reader. And if you can hook them in and get them on a topic they're interested with, then that might encourage them to read and grow in their reading and literacy skills. So I find that just fascinating.
Oh
I love
yeah. Yeah, and that's immediately getting your book in the hands of so many kids.
Right. And honestly, they're available on Amazon and Barnes and Noble too. And
Yeah.
I actually, about a year ago, went to a conference and had a teacher bring one of my educational market books to me to sign. So that was just that was just an amazing experience.
Oh, that's awesome. So with the educational market, is an agent as necessary as the, general market? Like, how does that work there? You said something about packets.
Sure. Most agents won't get involved in educational market books because the pay is much lower than maybe the
Okay.
trade market. And it's just handled in a complete reversal than what your trade market books are, on in the way that they're handled. Typically, I will submit a resume, as well as some writing samples and a list of topics that I'm interested in writing about to a publisher. And then they look at their list that they cultivate from schools and teachers and just where they've gauged that the topics that are of interest that are needed in the market at that moment. And then they try to match a writer with a topic that they want to cover. Many of these are part of a series. They may have one author do several books in a series, or they may split that series up among several authors. And then they roll it out. They pay an author a one-time fee, so there's no royalties. I'm hired to write the material. They handle everything else. I get the paycheck and move on. So no, no marketing, but occasionally I do put up that, hey, I've got another book coming out, it's for the ed market. And sometimes the topics that I write about in the ed market tie very nicely in with my trade book.
And that helps you earn some, some kind of street cred among the other publishing companies. Hey, I know how to
Absolutely.
work with editors and
Absolutely. And I had my first ed book come out right around the same time. I mean, literally the same month that my first trade book came
oh
out.
wow.
So it was just like, and they both dealt with space. And it was just really interesting to have suddenly I went from no books out to two books out. And my ed books and my trade books have both kind of competed on up. So I've just signed my third contract for my third trade book, and I've got my third ed book coming out this fall. So it's kind of interesting to see how that all plays out.
Oh, that's cool. So your one book that's coming out, M is for Mason Jar.
Mhm.
It's a alphabet book about homesteading, is that right?
That's correct.
Yeah, as somebody who was homeschooled, K through 12, I know quite a bit about homesteading,
Oh, it's great.
That's, and
So
so
many
what
people know nothing about it.
it's such a well, what do you call it? Like a subculture kind of thing. Like what, for those who aren't familiar, what is homesteading?
Well, in the traditional sense, pioneer homesteading was when the people started moving out west, staking a claim on a piece of land, and then just building a home and living off the land. That was very, very popular back, you know, in Little House on the Prairie days. So there's a
Yeah.
ton of books kind of written around that theme because Little House on the Prairie was so popular and it really spawned a lot of books about that era. But modern day homesteading is a bit different. I mean, we're not pioneers going out west, staking out a claim of land that no one else has ever cultivated before. I think it's more of a mindset, of people who are looking to live, a self-sustainable life. They're looking to, maybe cultivate the land in new ways, maybe make the most of what they're experiencing at home, be safe for the environment. Um, it can span anywhere from having your own garden and canning to learning how to make your own soaps or raising chickens or livestock to foraging in the woods a little bit for your own mushrooms or wildflowers. I mean, there's a lot of different ways that you can be kind of experiment with the homesteading lifestyle.
Yeah. Yeah, I just had pizza last night with some tomatoes from last year that I had put up. So that's
Yeah, one of the big things that I learned about homesteading is this whole thought process of planning for the year. Uh,
yeah.
growing your own food and trying to preserve it so that it'll last you for a full year. And I can say that for the last several years, we have not bought one jar of tomato sauce because we do one major tomato sauce production thing every August, and it lasts us through the whole year. And nothing tastes better in the middle of winter than fresh homemade tomato sauce. I love it.
Absolutely. And I feel like when COVID happened,
Mhm.
homesteading really, the interest in homesteading really shot up. I mean, you had tons of people interested in sourdoughs and all these different things. Like, so this really feels, did you come up with this idea during that time, or did you see the trend, and you're like, I've got to write this?
It was interesting. The answer is yes and no. I mean, I got involved in homesteading way before COVID. It was just kind of accidental. I have a lot of migraines that's triggered by all
Hmm.
the preservatives. And so since I've been about 19 or 20, I've been slowly making this trend towards, just a healthier lifestyle. And part of that was, searching out foods and different things that would be, healthier and less processed. As far as the idea for this book, it was literally right after COVID began. It was back in 2020. I belong to a homesteading group on Facebook, and I guess there was a bunch of people online that got bored one day and they started an ABC thread on homesteading. And it was a very adult version of it. But they were just going by and having a great time. And that afternoon, I sat down with my husband and was reading through this list they came up with. And we were just laughing. It was funny. It was meant to be fun. And I happened to just flippantly say, "Oh, I bet I could write a kid's version of this." And I laughed it off. And my husband just deadpan looked at me and he says, "Well, why don't you?" And I was like, "Okay, that's something to think about." And probably around the same time, I had read a couple of blogs where some homesteading moms were concerned about the lack of children's books on modern day homesteading. They could find a whole bunch of pioneer homesteading books, but there wasn't anything that they could find really out there in the market on modern day homesteading movement. And I started to put two and two together and I said, okay, I'll write it. I never thought it would get published. It was something I just wrote almost for fun.
That's awesome. And so, you have the M is for Mason jar, you have the picture book Moon Tree. Like where do you find nonfiction ideas for a picture book? Because when you're writing fiction picture books, you come up with a story and stuff, but these are, you're discovering things. Like where do you, I mean, obviously, for that one you found it on Facebook group, but where did Moon Tree come from?
Each of my ideas come from someplace different. I think they all spawned from my own curiosity. I was always a curious child. I love nature. Um, and they both kind of have ties in nature or the natural.
Yeah.
Um, Moon Tree, I stumbled on that totally kind of by accident. Um, so to speak, I guess they were both kind of by accident as well, as most of my ideas are. But I had gone up to a local outdoor museum up in the mountains here in North Carolina and was looking for a topic for a magazine on forestry. And I was just scouting around. It was one of the birthplaces of forestry here in the United States. And I thought I can find a good topic here. And so I was just looking and I passed a tree that had a placard, Moon Tree, across it. And I stopped about 20 feet past it because it took that long to register in my brain. And I grew up on just south of Cape Canaveral. I love studying astronomy. I love studying everything about the moon. And I had no idea what a moon tree was. So I backpedaled and I read the story about the moon trees and Stuart Roosa and Apollo 14 on this placard. And I was like, oh, how fascinating. I had never heard of these before. And I just kind of filed it away in the files that we file all the interesting ideas in our brain, but it kept nagging at me. And so a couple months later, I did a little bit of research on it. Didn't see anything much written about it, especially in the children's world. And so I decided to take a deep dive into research. And the more I dug into it, the more I wanted to dig into it. And I took every rabbit hole possible down the research hole, researching that book. And
Yeah.
it was the first that came out. It was my debut. So I was very proud of it.
Oh, so that was the first one.
Mhm.
Okay. Oh, nice. You said that getting into the educational market, first time around, you didn't, you didn't really get any bites, then you had to keep working it. So, you know, what is your advice to other writers that are trying to break into this market? What have you learned that you wish you had known sooner?
As far as the educational market goes,
Yeah.
I think what really helped me during the second round of submissions was having very targeted writing samples.
Mm.
During my first round, I'd pick, oh, I've written this article. I've written, here's a picture book sample. I just kind of grabbed things that I had done haphazardly. I really wasn't thinking like an educational publisher thought. Um, and there were two things I ended up doing. I ended up taking a class through the Writing Barn that was a 6-week course on getting into the educational market. And during that course, our assignments were each week to write a passage, like a 400 to 500 word passage that targeted a very specific age group on a very specific project. And that's where a lot of publishers are doing. They're wanting you to hit a reading level, they're wanting you to hit an age level because that's what they're going to pitch to the schools. And learning how to write on grade level or how to write on target was something that I really hadn't given a whole lot of thought up until that point. So I learned how to do that, and I left that class with a pile of samples that I could send to these educational publishers. The second thing I did was get the book by Laura Purdy Salas on writing for the educational market. And I really honed in my whole packet, which included the resume, a cover letter, the list of potential topics. Now, my resume for the educational publishers is very different than my resume for my job. So I had to completely rework my resume and think again, what is an educational publisher really going to be interested in, and then build it from there.
Yeah, because you said in your questionnaire that you have a master's degree in journalism. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So do you include that on your, obviously you include that on your resume for work, but do you include that on your resume for the educational market?
I do, but I don't give it the place that I
Okay.
would on my professional resume for jobs. For jobs that might come up close to the top, it would be pretty prominent. I think on the my educational publisher resume, it's kind of to the side in a sidebar. Oh, by the way, I have these little degrees that are just kind of tucked away, but they're not the experience that an educational publisher is looking for. I focus on the books that I have published both on the educational market and the trade market. Some of the awards I've won, passage writing that I've done that is on target for specific grade levels. And then I kind of go down from there. I'll list, because I have a lot of experience writing professionally. So I'll list my jobs, but they're further down.
That makes sense. So when you're planning the different books, you had two that came out that were about space, and you had like the similarities. Like, are you planning that on purpose, or is it just how it's falling together?
That was completely by accident it, or divine intervention.
Yeah.
It kind of just fell together. I had sold Moontree um, a year and a half before, and then I was approached by an educational publisher to write a book on moons after the contracts were already slated and signed for Moontree. I had no idea they were going to hit the publishing release dates right near the same time. That was to me so out of my hands. And you know, publishing schedules, they can get switched and shoved and pushed back and whatever. The educational market schedules are a little more rigid. Typically, things are coming out either fall and spring, and they're usually about a year after you contract things. So they are they are pretty much on schedule, but trade market's a bit different. It just so happened that they both came out like at the same time. It was kind of funny.
I love that. And so you're writing educational stuff, but you're also writing things, from your Christian faith. Like, do you have to be careful in the educational market? Do you want to write something more overt for the trade market? Like, what is your mindset with that?
Well, definitely different publishers are looking for different things.
Yeah.
And it really depends on the project, on what publisher is going to be most interested in it. I mean, with the educational market, there there is room for writing about faith. There are certain publishers that look for entire books about, explain Islam, explain Christianity, explain all the world religions. Some of them have more of a faith component. Um, than most others will. But there is room for it if you go and actually seek out publishers that do that. For the trade market, again, it's all based on the actual project.
Yeah.
Um, as to where your agent or whether you as an individual writer are going to submit that project out. I had a very overt picture book written that was very overtly Christian. I didn't get it sold, so I ended up selling it to a Christian magazine, and they snatched it right up. Um, now, do I want to write other things that are maybe more Christian market than general market? Yes. So far, I don't have another project that's being circulated right now. I have one that kind of straddles the line that could go to either market, and my agent has been subbing it to some Christian publishers and some general market publishers. So far, no bites, but it's there. But it's one of those things that it's like, okay, I think it will. It's general enough that it wouldn't offend either market.
Yeah. And there's some things like with the educational market, there's some just historical figures that you can't talk about without talking about their faith. You can't,
Exactly.
you really can't talk about MLK without, I mean, he was a reverend, it's hard to, it's hard to talk about some people without that. And so that's an easy way of doing that.
Exactly. And you're not pushing your views on somebody. You're telling the story of what one person has done and essentially sharing their faith story.
Yeah.
And so that's a way you can share your faith, by sharing someone else's faith in a nonfiction package.
Yeah. I love that. And so you've got M is for Mason Jar, and it hits shelves on August 12th. And then you have a educational book about the planet Mercury releasing this fall. Is that right?
Sometime this fall. I'm not sure of
Okay.
it.
And then you already have a book coming out. You already know you have a book coming out in 2028. Is that right?
Yes, that was just purchased and it was announced about a month ago. So that date might get moved around a bit. It's far enough out there, but yes.
That's awesome. people say it takes, a year to write a picture book, but it takes sometimes a long time to get it published. You're working on lots of different projects. So how do you how do you find that balance? How long do you work on one project until you work on the next one and then come back, and what's your process that way?
It varies per book, but I'm one of these. I'm a bit of a slow writer when it comes to picture books because I like to write, let it sit, write, let it sit for a while. And I do take a full year to really craft a picture book, to get, the research done, to do a draft, let it breathe, revise, let it breathe. And so typically it's around a year. Now that can vary. With Moontree, I put that out a couple times and then had to do complete rewrites before it got picked up. So it took me a few rounds
Yeah.
before I found the format that worked for that particular book. M is for Mason jar was a little quicker for me. I didn't go through the different rewrites I did with Moontree, and it got picked up right away. So it wasn't as long of a process. So I think it does depend on each individual project, but I do tend to like to let things sit because I'll come back to something 3, 6 months later and be like, oh goodness, I'm so glad I didn't let that out in the world before it was ready, because you just see it with so many different, it's such a new set of eyes, and you've learned a lot in even a short amount of time, and you're like, oh no, this is not going to do. I need to rework this. So
Yeah. Yeah, it always looks worse the longer you let it sit.
I know I look back at some of my very first picture books and I'm like, oh, I'm so glad nobody saw this.
And so, how much information and research do you have to do for an educational picture book? And do you have to do like the bibliographies and all of that? Like how does that work?
For the educational market,
Yeah.
um, it is a lot of research. Um, I would say I'm doing just about as much research with some of those books as I am a nonfiction trade book, maybe
Okay.
even sometimes more. It sometimes doesn't feel as much because it's compressed into a short amount of time. Usually, our deadlines for the educational market books are they're quick turnarounds. Um, I don't have a year to sit and work on it. A lot of times I only have 2 months. So I may just really dive in and do a quick, and just really focus for, 3, 4 weeks on just doing research and compiling everything that I can about that topic. And different publishers want you to do research a little differently. So it kind of depends what that publisher is specifically looking for. Instead of a full biography, well, I should say that in addition to a full biography for an educational book, every line is footnoted. So each and every fact or statement that you make in an educational market book, you have to be able to back it up with research. Now, all that's not printed in the book, but your editor has to see it because they will fact check every single word to make sure it is accurate before it goes out. So I have found my process in writing those books to be very different than when I'm writing a trade book. I don't have the time to just kind of let it sit and permeate for a little bit. I've got to be a little more quicker. I've got to push through it. A lot of times I have to block out some space and just say, okay, I'm going to just go away and lock myself in a room for a while and write because this needs to be done and I'm on a deadline.
Yeah. Yes, I've never seen a manuscript that, of a picture book like that the editors see, but I'm starting to realize it's completely different than the picture book that you see.
Yes, definitely. Definitely.
So you probably put, hyperlinks and all of that in, brackets and cite all the sources and everything.
For the educational market books.
Yeah, okay.
Trade books, I typically just have a bibliography. Now, I typically will have like some kind of timeline or some kind of huge document with all my facts and where I found all that information, almost like my own personal index that if anybody wants me to go back and find where I found a certain fact, I can kind of trace it back. But I don't for my trade books footnote every single line. But I have it, I have that information in another format somewhere.
Yeah, and your journalism background, you're always probably researching more and probably getting, more information than you need, but it's always better to err on the side of caution.
My bibliography for Moontree, which was a 350 word manuscript, was 20 pages long. It was massive,
That's
way more
hilarious.
than I needed.
Yes. So, have you ever stumbled upon a project or an idea that there's so much you can't condense it into a picture book?
Well, Moontree was that way. I couldn't put everything in it.
Yeah.
I wanted to. My first draft of it was over 1,500 words long. Um, but I found that I needed to really boil it down to the essence of the story. There were a lot of facts in there that were great, fascinating facts. You just want to throw them in because kids are going to eat them up. But did they add to the story? Did they really build on the theme that was going through? Many of them not. They make great discussion points for school visits or when I'm putting together an educational guide or something like that, or writing a blog article or something, I can throw some extra things in. But they all don't belong in one single book unless I'm going to just list a bunch of factoids. And that's not going to capture kids' attention as much as a story will.
Yeah, picture books, more like the springboard, to kind of get the conversation going, it can't cover everything.
Yeah. I don't think they were ever meant to.
No.
They're
I
not
don't
an encyclopedia.
no. Looking into the future, you have how many books under your belt now?
Um, as far as ones that will be coming out,
Yeah,
there
like sold.
sold, contract signed, there'll be six.
Okay, nice.
So three for the educational market and three trade books.
Okay. So, as you're planning for the future, are you looking to expand into fiction? Are you looking to stay in nonfiction? What are kind of your hopes for this? Because now you're starting to, get a name for yourself and kind of get a specialty. And do you want to stay in that? Do you want to branch out? What's
I love nonfiction. I don't see myself as leaving that anytime soon. Um, but I do really love fiction too. There's just something special about that. I am working on a middle grade novel.
oh,
Uh,
nice.
I don't know if it would ever sell, but I finished the first draft of it about a month ago. So I'm really looking forward to getting into the rewrites and seeing where this goes. I do have several fiction picture books that are laying around my computer that I'd love to see get out into the world, but nonfiction just seemed to be a good niche for me.
Yeah.
And so I do love it. I love research. I love finding out new things about nature and people. And so I don't see that as going away.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's the door that's open. You you
Yes.
might as well, this is the thing that's doing well. You don't want to you don't
I
want to
won't
just
rock that boat.
yeah, exactly. And so you have also been featured in the devotional 21 Days of Grace.
Yes.
And so you were gracious enough to offer a giveaway to our listeners.
Yes.
So,
Yes, absolutely. It's a fun devotional guide of 21 stories, fiction stories
oh,
that have a
okay.
devotional attached to it. So it's a devotional for fiction lovers.
Oh, that's nice. So like short stories with,
Yes.
okay, nice. So if you want to win 21 Days of Grace, here's how you enter. Send us an email to info.writetoignite@gmail.com. That's info.writetoignite@gmail.com. Or you can comment on this blog post on our website at writetoignite.com and you could be the winner. Well, thank you so much, Carolyn, for doing this. I can't wait to read some of your books. I looked up your moon tree and I was like, what is a moon tree? And I think I went down the same rabbit hole you went down. And
It's fascinating. They'll just grab you and suck you in.
they will. I love it. So I'm looking forward to Emma's for Mason jar. I think that sounds really exciting. And yeah, you're right. The homeschoolers that I know, they watch Little House on the Prairie. They read the books and there's nothing modern homesteading.
Well, I hope this will really hit with the homeschoolers.
Yeah. Yeah. I'll definitely tell my homeschool friends.
Thank you. Thank you. That would be wonderful.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for doing this.
Oh, no problem. I was glad to. I had fun.
Yeah. And we'll put in the show notes where people can find you. Are you on social media? Are
I am. I'm still on Twitter, X. I'm on Instagram. I'm on Facebook at Carolyn B. Fraiser. So,
Okay.
or you can find me on my website at carolynbfraiser.com.
All right. Well, thank you so much and have a great day.
Thank you. You too.